Tad stared at the ancient plantation house shrouded in live oaks and Spanish moss. His friend Colin paused beside the porch. "Come on. Ain't going in." Tad's mouth was so dry he could barely speak. "Mammy, she done say hags and witches. That's old slaves' talk." Not a trace of fear showed on the boy's white face. "Wasn't right to steal pie, Colin." The odor of decay mingled with the smell of fresh apple and cinnamon from under the golden crust. "Now we make the devil happy. Dr. Jenkins won't miss one little pie." Colin stepped onto the porch. The planks creaked and bowed. Tad stepped closer. Streaks of sun peeked through leaves covering the battered porch in speckled light. He looked up at the ceiling and almost wailed. Look! Color's black. Ain't no way we surviving. Old slaves talk." Colin took a few steps toward the front door that hung by a single hinge. "You're a darky, Tad, and you make as much sense as one, too." Tad stared at the peeling black paint, his mouth open wide and fists clenched. Someone had died inside the house before it was abandoned, a place cursed with death, and then forsaken, was dangerous beyond words. Colin stared at the porch ceiling for a moment and swallowed. He swept aside a strand of hair and reached for the doorknob. The heavy, wide door crashed to the porch and crumbled into a pile of rotten wood splinters. The dust cleared, and he stepped over the mound and disappeared into the dark interior. "We can eat the pie in here." His voice echoed from inside. Tad whimpered. "Abraham, Moses, deliver we." He clutched his hands together. It wasn't the first time Colin had gotten the two in trouble, but because he was Massa's son, and Tad was a slave, Tad knew he'd be the one blamed. That's how it had been since they were born. His fingers clasped around the silver cross that hung from a leather strap around his neck. "Lord, protect we." He followed his friend into the dark house. Inside, through a broken window, a ray of light lit the stairway. The ceiling sagged, as if ready to crash down on them. Wallpaper hung in strips, drooping like willow branches. Tad felt the musky dampness in his nose and choked back a sneeze. "I'm leaving." A wave of hunger washed over him, and his mind swirled. He reached for the banister to steady himself. Colin leapt up and slipped an arm around his waist. "Sit down here." Colin helped him rest on the bottom step. Tad leaned his head against the wall. Colin crossed the room and picked up the pie he'd set down, and Tad felt his friend's warm skin as he settled close. "You look terrible." Colin dipped his fingers into the pie and grabbed a handful of cooked apples. "Eat this. You'll feel better." Colin dropped a handful into Tad's palm, and Tad felt the warm, moist pie on his fingers. While Colin found trouble now and again, he always looked after Tad. Colin grabbed a handful of cooked apples and shoved them into his mouth. "This pie is delicious." He smiled. A piece of crust stuck to his lip. "Go ahead, Tad. You need it." His mouth watered at the sweet smell. Tad hesitated. "You hear that?" Colin lifted his head. "I didn't hear anything." "Sounded like a whistle." "Probably just a bird." "No, a whistle. There." Tad put a clean hand behind his ear. "You hear it that time?" Colin jumped. The pie dish clattered on the floor. His eyes grew wide. "Witches, come to get us." Tad dropped his piece and clasped his head. A strong desire to run came over him. Run and climb a tree. "Let's get out of here. The back door." Colin darted past the staircase. He froze. His hands lifted slowly into the air. Tad shrieked. He dashed toward the front door and slammed into a body as solid as a brick wall. Massive arms wrapped around him. "Let me go." He stared up into the man's stern black face. Laughter filled the decaying house. "Caught ya." Another man stepped forward. "Been looking to catch you for quite some time, boy." The strong arms spun Tad around, and he looked into a shriveled white face as sour as the breath that hissed from the toothless mouth.